What is going on, everyone? This is Mohammed, your PMP coach from Certify with Ease. And in this video, we're going to look at a very hot topic for the PMP exam. That is telling the difference between an agile project and a predictive project. This is essential for you to understand because your answer will depend a lot of the times on what project you are dealing with. Okay, there are four main differences that I've listed out in this quick presentation. We're going to dive into it soon. Remember, I've included a free gift for you guys in the description of this video. You'll have all the different features of an agile in comparison with the predictive project in that free gift. Okay, so let's jump into it right away with probably the most important change. Sorry, not the most important difference, which is going to be about the change requests. Change requests, extremely important topic, and you need to be able to master. Not only master it, but tell the difference between the change control process for a predictive project and how changes are handled in a agile project. Okay, let's jump into it right now. So in a predictive project, we have a change control process, also known as the Perform Change Control Integrated Process. These are a couple of steps. Anytime there's a change for a predictive project, you want to make sure that all of these steps are covered. Number one, the change required. Okay? So ask yourself this question. When a change comes in, is a change request actually required? When is a change request required? A change request is required when, let me just change the color for you guys. When the scope, budget, or schedule is impacted. When you have a situation where the scope, the schedule, and the budget is impacted, a change request is needed. If you really think about it, these three things are interconnected. When you change the scope a bit, let's say, for example, you are constructing a house and you tell, the client comes up to you and the client says, hey, not only do I want a house, I also want a parking lot or driveway. That's going to change the scope. That's going to increase the scope. When you increase the scope, you increase the budget and you increase the schedule because you're adding more work. So when any of these three things are affected, you want to submit a change request, okay? So ask yourself the first question. The first question is to ask, is a change request actually required? Once you validate that information, once you understand, okay, you know what? I actually need to submit a change. Then you are going to submit that change. You're going to submit a change request, a formal change request. Once that change is submitted, the PM, the project manager, will then analyze that change. You do not have to know what the PM analyzes, but basically the PM will gather all the relevant information required. So the CCB, which is the next step, knows exactly what they're dealing with. The Change Control Board. Change Control Board, a bunch of stakeholders that get together and they discuss the incoming change requests. The CCB will then decide, you know what? Let's either reject this change or approve it. If the change is rejected, it's communicated and it doesn't get executed because the change is rejected. And if the change is approved, it gets executed. Very important. It goes back into the execution phase. And it makes sense. If your change is approved, you want to execute on it. You want to implement whatever change has come through. Now, this is the entire Perform Change Control integrated process for a predictive project. Or in short, this is how changes are handled for a predictive project. This is key. You need to understand that this is for a predictive project. Now, what about an agile project? That's very interesting. Agile projects don't really have a formal change control process like our predictive projects. Agile projects, they welcome changes more frequently because there's so much uncertainty for an agile project. Things are changing so rapidly that changes are required in order to progress. Now, how does a change request, how are changes handled in an agile project? Let's talk about this. Over here, we have something known as the product backlog. This is not the entire sprint development cycle, but you can easily Google it if you're confused or if you need the entire cycle. But anyways, you have the product backlog. Remember, the product backlog has the features listed in a prioritized fashion, prioritized based on value. Whatever the organization, whatever the client deems as valuable will be placed up front. Okay, so you might have features 1, features 2, 3, 4. Let's say feature 4 is the most valuable feature to the client. So this feature will be placed in the number 1 spot. Okay, so the product backlog again consists of features prioritized by value. Great. Once you have the product backlog, you also have the sprint planning meeting. But let's say, for example, in this iteration, which is the first iteration, let's just call it that, you have decided as a team that you're going to work on features 1, 2, and 3. This over here is your sprint. Now here's what's really interesting. When the sprint starts, there are no more changes allowed. No more changes allowed. Except for one case. Or except for a couple of cases that share the same theme. This is very important. Remember this for your exam. If something happens during the project, let's say, for example, the government comes along and implements a law, or there is something that comes along that needs to be considered. Let's just say a must-have. If that's the case, and you cannot delay it, you need to implement whatever situation happens. You need to implement it. For example, the government comes along and says, you know what, buildings can't be above a certain height starting next week. You got no choice now. The skyscraper that you're building has to adapt to that law. If that happens, you can then go back to the sprint backlog or the product backlog, and you can change the priorities and then include that change. I apologize, by the way, for my really bad drawings. Forgive me for this. Hopefully you guys can understand it. Any comments, you can always comment in the comment section. So you're going to implement that change and then you're going to include it in the sprint. Okay, so just remember this really important rule. If there is a must-have and you need to implement it, you can reprioritize the backlog to consider that change, for example, a law or regulation the government stipulates, and then you include it in the sprint moving forward. But typically speaking, once the sprint starts, you don't consider any other changes that are not within this laws or must-have component, okay? Now, when do you actually implement changes? Well, once the sprint is finished, what you're going to do is you're going to speak to your clients, your stakeholders, do retrospectives at the end of the sprint. The client's going to say, you know what, Mohammed, that's my name, by the way, if you guys forgot. We like your product, but we want an extra camera on the back of our phone. Instead of having 2 cameras, we want 2 more. All right? You're going to take that feature now. You're going to reprioritize it in the backlog. That is basically considered your change. So there's two things that I want you to remember here. When it comes to the sprint, technically speaking, if the change is a must-have, meaning that you have to consider, you have no choice, you will implement it in the sprint, in the current sprint. If the client at the end of the sprint wants additional features or wants changes to the product, the client is welcome to add those features. And once those features are added, they'll be added in a prioritized fashion into the product backlog. So let's say, for example, the camera example, it's an important feature. They have to have it because people these days want a whole bunch of cameras on their phone. It might hit the number one spot. And now the next sprint is going to focus on adding more cameras to the phone. Okay? That is how you deal with change requests in a very simple manner when it comes to the agile approach and when it comes to predictive, as we've seen before. Now let's move on to the inverted triangle. This is a extremely hot topic, and you guys got to understand this. This is one of the most important topics. So check this out. You might see this triangle as the iron triangle as well. That's another name for it. I like calling it the agile triangle, and then you have the inverted triangle. The PMP exam is not going to ask you to name things, so you don't have to worry about that. But you need to understand this concept. Okay? Let's start with the waterfall or predictive approach. The scope is going to be fixed. Meaning what? Meaning if we're building a bridge, just ignore the software key term over here. Just think of this as your traditional or your waterfall projects completely. The best example that I have for you guys is the bridge example. Why? Because a bridge is completely predictive, or for the most part predictive. Why is it predictive? Because bridges have been built for centuries. We know exactly what we're getting out of the end of this project. So the scope for a bridge building project will be fixed, meaning that I know exactly what I'm getting. I'm getting a bridge. Now, when it comes to resources, on the other hand, resources and time can vary. Because our scope is fixed, this means that we need to reach that point. We need to reach building this bridge. Because of that, if we need to adjust the time to accommodate, or if we need to adjust our budget or our resources to accommodate, we will do so. So let's say, for example, the bridge initially is stipulated to be finished within 4 years. And then after the 30-year mark, we need an extra 3 more years. So because you are adjusting the time, as a consequence, you'll be adjusting the resources as well. Very important. Okay, so just remember, scope for predictive is fixed. And the other two things are, they vary. Now, agile, on the other hand, is reversed. So for agile, your scope will vary. For agile, you could think about it this way. You can say to yourself, okay, you know what? You gather your project team and you say, hey, everyone, we are going to try to create as much as we can, your scope, as much as you can, with a fixed time and a fixed budget, or fixed time and fixed resources. So Apple does this a lot, actually. That's why every single year you have a new Apple iPhone, or every other year you have a new Apple iPhone. They are using a agile approach. They're telling themselves, they're gathering their team, and they're saying, hey, listen, we want to release fixed time. We want to release a new Apple iPhone in the coming year. Your time is fixed now. We have a budget of, let's say, $1 billion. What can we make with this time and with this budget? What can we make when it comes to our new Apple iPhone scope? Understand? Your time is fixed. Your resources are fixed. What can we make with this time, with this resource, how much of this product can we actually get done? So in reality, when you're looking at the Apple iPhone, it's not technically a new product. Everyone knows that. It's not technically a new product. They're building off the previous generations. They're following in completely agile development cycle. So this is the key difference between the agile triangle and the inverted triangle, or when it comes to predictive, you can also call it the iron triangle. All right, cool. Let's talk about value delivery. This is pretty simple, but it's a core concept that everyone needs to understand. I'm telling you, if you guys understand the differences between agile and predictive, oh man, you are ready for the exam. You're ready for a lot of it because you need to be able to understand when it comes to solving the problems. All right. For a predictive project, value is realized at the end of the project or at the end of a phase. When you're building a bridge, when will you get the most value? You will get the most value when the bridge is ready, when cars can actually use the bridge to get across, when people can use the bridge to get across. That is when you start to realize, or that is when the value truly materializes. So at the end of the project. Now when it comes to Agile, on the other hand, Agile is a little bit different because Agile projects thrive on value delivery. When you're proceeding with an Agile project, you need to be able to understand where the most value-added items are. Which pathway should I take? Should I go left? Should I go right? Should I continue forward? Should I go backwards? Where is the most value-added step or feature or item that you need to tackle? This basically, understanding value delivery, understanding value, drives your project forward. And it guides you into completing as much as the project as possible. Let's say, for example, you're building your new cell phone company. You're building a new smartphone company. You're building this new smartphone, and you got so many competitors. You got Apple, you got Samsung, you got all these companies out there, and you don't know what direction to head towards. You're gonna allow your customers to tell you basically what they like, and this is a way of realizing value. Customers tell you what they want. Okay, fine. You want me to move to the left? I'll move to the left. You want me to move to the right? I'll move to the right. And in this way, you'll be able to understand what is valuable and what is not valuable. So value is required throughout every single step, or very consistently throughout a agile project, because there's just too much uncertainty. You don't know where to head. But a predictive, like the name implies, is predictive. And because of that, because of the nature of the project, we know that we'll get the value at the end of the project. All right, let's move on to the last one. Remember, there's a little gift for you guys at the end. It's a chart with a whole bunch of differences, so you guys could be as prepared as possible for the exam. And of course, I also linked my course down in the description below. If you're interested, please check it out. And stop giving up your weekends and spending months and months and months studying. Get this exam over with by taking my course. Okay, let's move on to the next section, which is customer feedback, which goes hand to hand with value. Okay. So customer feedback happens less frequently in a predictive project. Why? Because again, the nature of the project. As it being because it's a predictive project, we know exactly what the feedback is going to be. We know what the customer wants. We know exactly what the customer wants because it's been done so many times over and over and over. So customer feedback can happen less frequently. However, for an agile project, you need constant feedback from your customer to guide you. Your customer, your client, These are your value drivers. We have this concept in Lean Six Sigma as well, or any lean course you take. Your customer, your client, voice of the customer, listen to them. They will direct you. They will tell you exactly where they want you to go. So when it comes to customer feedback, in an Agile project, it will happen much more frequently. And that is about it. These are the key 4 differences when it comes to a predictive and an Agile project. Now, I included a whole bunch in document format in the description below. You can access it. And of course, as well, check out my course, book an appointment with me. Let us get you certified as soon as possible so you can move on. You don't have to worry and stress over studying for months. You can have access to higher paying opportunities and have a competitive edge over your fellow colleagues, okay? Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, write a comment so I know how I can improve these videos. Take care and have a fantastic rest of the day. Take care.